A very good afternoon, everyone, or the greetings of the day whenever you are watching this informative video session. In this video session, we are going to discuss about the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. Recently, in this particular week, the Supreme Court made certain observations about the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, and these observations had legal, humanitarian and ethical undertones. So we are going to analyze the Supreme Court's observation about sexual harassment at workplace and analyze that verdict or that observation under the lens of legal implications, under the lens of ethical implications and under the lens of humanitarian implications. So if you look at the sexual harassment at workplace, this act was enacted in the year 2013, inspired from the Vishakha guidelines given by the Supreme Court to protect the women at the workplace from their lewd supervisors, from their lewd employers. Those employers who have this habitual tendency of outraging the modesty of the women at the workplace. To protect the women from such kind of people, the Vishakha guidelines were passed by the Supreme Court, which was enacted by the government in the year 2013 in the form of the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. Now, what did the Supreme Court observe? The Supreme Court has showcased its displeasure, or the Supreme Court has observed and felt really bad about, or the Supreme Court condemned. The Supreme Court condemned red tapeism in the cases related to sexual harassment at workplace act. सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कंडेम किया है. The Supreme Court has shown its displeasure that there is so much of bureaucratic hurdles. Red tapeism का मतलब है there is so much of bureaucratic hurdles. There is so much of bureaucratic hurdles in case of a woman filing a case of sexual harassment at workplace. This has resulted into victimization of the victim, further victimization of the victim. This is the legal implication. There is a person who has faced sexual harassment at workplace. That person must be given a speedy access to justice. That person must be provided justice quickly, efficiently and in its truest form. But what is actually happening? Because of the bureaucratic hurdle, because of the red tape, because of the file moving system in our judiciary, executive, whatever be the case, in all our government departments, there is so much of red tapeism and bureaucratic hurdle that the person who has been the victim of sexual harassment again feel victimized, because it is that person who has to bear the burden of red tapeism or over bureaucratization. So the red tapeism or over bureaucratization, according to the Supreme Court, is nothing but again a victimization of the victim who has faced sexual harassment at workplace. Let us go ahead a little bit. Now, Supreme Court remarked that this sexual harassment at workplace, or you can say the protection from sexual harassment at workplace has an humanitarian dimension, and that humanitarian dimension can be revealed from the fact that sexual harassment at workplace or the protection from sexual harassment at workplace, according to the Supreme Court, is part and parcel of Article 21. Article 21 of the Constitution, which has a very large undefined dimension, that particular act does embody in itself the women's right to protection from the sexual harassment at workplace. According to the Supreme Court, the part of the fundamental, so according to the Supreme Court, the right against sexual harassment at the workplace is a part of the fundamental right to dignified life. That is, protection from sexual harassment at workplace is very important for human life's dignity. This is the humanitarian dimension. And therefore, if you introduce red tapeism, if you introduce over bureaucratization in cases related to the sexual harassment at workplace, you are depriving the victim his or her fundamental right of human life with dignity. So legally you are victimizing the victim again. Humanitarian grounds पे you are not providing the humanitarian aid to that victim would deserve this particular aid efficiently, quickly and in its truest manner. Now let us look at the ethical undertones. If we look at the ethical undertones of this particular observation of the Supreme Court, we can see that number one, whenever there is over bureaucratization in cases related to the vulnerable section of the population, it is actually showcasing a pathetic attitude of the officials. The government officials, they are showing a pathetic attitude, or you can call it as indifferent attitude. That is, they are not at all understanding the pain of the victim. They are not showcasing initiative, voluntary urge to take one step ahead and help the victim of the sexual harassment at workplace. This indifferent or apathetic attitude showcases those values which are not the values or the foundational values of civil services. This apathetic or indifferent attitude showcase that there is lack of empathy, there is lack of compassion in the bureaucracy. तभी तो एक victim को over exploit किया जाता है. The victim is exploited over and over again, which results into that person losing the trust upon the justice delivery machine. And you know that the government functions on the public trust. If the public trust withers away from the government office, the government office will no longer hold any kind of importance in the country or anywhere in the world if the public trust is taken off from the government office. There are other ethical issues which include over bureaucratization, which includes over bureaucratization. So there is absence of empathy, compassion, there is over bureaucratization, and most important, because the victim in such cases is a woman. Alright, because the victim is a woman and red tapeism is being carried out, it is showcasing entrenchment of patriarchal behavior. This is entrenchment of patriarchy. It is entrenchment of patriarchy. The women, which is the weaker section of the population, is facing this bureaucratic hurdle, which further increases the vulnerability, which enforces the patriarchal mindset, or is a very clear display of public patriarchy. So this is nothing but it is a display. Alright, such kind of attitude from the government side becomes the display of what? Display of public patriarchy. It is a display of public patriarchy. So the Supreme Court has observed and given a very due consideration to reduce, or made the government realize its responsibility to reduce the red tapeism in the cases related to sexual harassment at workplace, because though Supreme Court did not explicitly say, but we can understand that Supreme Court want to say that there is a humanitarian, legal and ethical implication, that the victim is suffering not on just legal grounds but also on humanitarian and ethical grounds. So this is the Supreme Court observation. Now, taking a liberty over here, we are going to discuss certain provisions of the sexual harassment at workplace. So if we look at the provisions of this sexual harassment at workplace, the first important provision is that this act defines what is sexual harassment at workplace. This act provides a mechanism for grievance redressal related to sexual harassment at workplace, and this act provides safeguards. So this act, protection of women from sexual harassment at workplace, it defines for the first time what is a sexual harassment. It defines for the first time the mechanism that must be put in place for redressal of the grievances emerging from sexual harassment at workplace, and it has provided safeguards particularly to those victims who are actually the victim of false implication. So these two are for the victim, and the last one is the providing safeguard to the person who is falsely implicated. Alright, so this is something very important to note here, that this bill not only help the victim but also protect the accused from falseful implication. So this is one of the very important provision of this particular bill. Alright, so it defines and provides mechanism for redressal of the grievance of the actual victim and protect the accused from falseful implication by a malicious victim who is portraying the victim card but is actually not the victim. The second important provision of this bill is that for any organization that is having at least 10 employees, there has to be an internal complaints committee. There has to be an internal complaints committee. This internal complaints committee will be exclusively looking into the cases of sexual harassment at workplace that takes place in this particular organization. So कोई भी organization है जिसमें कम से कम 10 employees हैं, उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर इंटरनल कंप्लेंट्स कमेटी बनानी पड़ेगी इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को, जो कि सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट एट वर्क प्लेस के केसेस के साथ डील करेगी. एट डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफिसर है, ही हैज़ टू क्रिएट अ लोकल कंप्लेंट्स कमेटी. He has to create a local complaints committee at district level, and if the district officer think that we need another local complaints committee at block level, he or she may go for creating the same. This is the third provision. At district level, the district officer has to create this local complaints committee. However, if this district officer is of the opinion that we need a local complaints committee at the block level also, the officer can go for creating a local complaints committee even at a block level scenario. Now, next provision, fourth. The local complaints committee, the local complaints committee, what it is going to do? It has been given the powers of a civil court to demand evidences. Alright, it will act as a civil court. It will act as a civil court to demand or gather evidences. The local complaints committee is going to act as a civil court in terms of gathering the information related to this particular case from the victim as well as from the accused, so that they can come out with a clean verdict. Now, this local complaints committee, it may even go for conciliation. It may go for conciliation, given that it may go for conciliation given that the victim demands one. अगर विक्टिम को किसी भी प्रकार का conciliation राजीनामा चाहिए तो local complaints committee can even go for the conciliation. And lastly, the employers, they have to face punitive or they have been prescribed punishment for non-compliance. Punishment for non-compliance. What are the punishment? The non-compliance of the employer with the provisions of the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act will be punishable with a fine up to rupees. Alright, fine of up to rupees 50,000 for non-compliance. And if there is a repeated violation, then this fine will increase, or it may even result into termination of license to carry out the business. It can even go for termination of license to carry out the business. Right? So, this is the provisions of this particular act. Now, coming to other dimensions related to challenges, data statistics, issues and analysis. For this, you are welcome in the Saturday current affairs class that is going to be held on 18th December from 2:30 p.m. That is going to be held, this 11th December 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. You are most welcome there. We are going to discuss in detail about the issues and challenges. So, here in this video so far we discussed what are the observations of the Supreme Court and what are the underlying implications as well as the provisions of this act. I hope you had a good learning experience. Keep tuned to Raj Malhotra IAS for further videos. See you in the next video. Have a great day. Have a great time until then. Be safe, be protected.